There are mysteries that cannot be explained with equations. They feel, and sometimes they are born from places where time doesn't seem to pass. Imagine a village lost in the sands of Mali, West Africa. Mud houses, drums that echo at sunset, and children growing up under a sky so pure it seems to touch eternity. The Dogons live there, a silent people, guardians of a wisdom that modern science only discovered a few decades ago. For centuries, the Dogons looked up at the night sky and told stories about an invisible star that revolved around Sirius, the brightest in the firmament. They called her Potolo, the seed of the world. They said it was a dense, small, and incredibly heavy star. The most surprising? This description coincides exactly with what 20th century astronomers would confirm as Sirius B, a white dwarf invisible to the naked eye, discovered only with modern telescopes. How could a tribe without optical instruments, isolated in the Bandiagara Mountains, know this? Coincidence? Divine inspiration? Or a memory of something much older? A knowledge inherited from those who, perhaps, did not come from Earth? If you feel like certain things are no coincidence, maybe this video is what you needed to hear. Because the history of the Dogons is not just about astronomy. It's about memory. A memory that seems to span time, as if the universe had left fragments of itself inside the human soul. Dogon elders say that knowledge is not learned. It is remembered. And, there is knowledge that sleeps in silence, waiting for the moment when humanity is ready to listen to it again. Among its myths, there is the figure of the Nomos, amphibious beings coming from celestial waters, messengers who descended in brilliant ships enveloped in sound and light. To them, the Nomos taught agriculture, metallurgy, and the secret of the stars. And when they left, they promised to return when the world was out of balance. It is not for nothing that the Dogons call the stars the eyes of God and the galaxy the spine of time. While the modern world scans the sky for new planets, the Dogons seem to say, "You are looking outside for what we keep inside." And perhaps that's why anthropologists, scientists, and spiritualists keep returning to their villages trying to decipher the impossible. How a people living without electricity can know the secrets of the cosmos with such precision. But perhaps the secret isn't in the stars, but in the way they look at them. For the Dogons, the sky is a mirror. Everything that exists above also pulsates here below. When they speak of Sirius and its companion star, they are not just describing celestial bodies. They are narrating the origin of consciousness itself. Some say that these myths are just coincidences, others which are memories of a time before known history, a time when humans still talk to the sky. Either way, there is something about the Dogons that defies logic, an ancient serenity that reminds us of where we came from and perhaps where we will return. Because perhaps the real mystery isn't what the Dogons know about Sirius, but how do they remember what we forget? And this is just the first light on this path. In the next few moments, we will go down together to the roots of this enigma, between myth, science, and spirit, to discover if the Dogons are just an ancient tribe, or the guardians of stellar knowledge that humanity, without knowing it, has been trying to find again for millennia. For generations, Dogon knowledge was passed down not through books but through songs. Their myths were not read, they were sung under fire. Each drum beat was a phrase, each gesture a memory. At the heart of their cosmogony is Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, which they call Sigitolo, the mother star, origin of all things. But interestingly, the Dogons claim that this star is not alone. They talk about Potolo, his invisible companion, small, dense, and very heavy, with an orbital cycle of 50 years. And they also mention Emiya, a third star, shrouded in mystery. For centuries, these stories were treated as poetic legends, until modern astronomy confirmed some of them. In 1862, with powerful telescopes, scientists identified Sirius B, exactly as the Dogons described, a white dwarf, so dense that a spoonful of its matter would weigh tons. Later, astronomers would detect small gravitational variations that suggest the possible existence of a third star in the system. How is this possible? How could an isolated people in the African desert describe with almost scientific precision something that humanity would only confirm millennia later? French anthropologist Marcel Griaule, who lived among the Dogons in the 1930s and 40s, recorded these narratives with amazement. They knew that Sirius B revolved around that of Sirius A every 50 years, exactly the modern calculation. They knew that it was invisible and composed of a substance heavier than all the iron on Earth. They also knew that the movement of the stars influenced the timing of harvests and the birth of children. For them, the cosmos was not a distant spectacle. It was a living body, of which the Earth was just the beating heart. The Dogons believe that everything in the universe is cyclical. Just as stars revolve around each other, human life also orbits an invisible center, the spirit. Therefore, their rituals are calculated according to the periods of Sirius. Every 60 years they celebrate the Sigi festival, which marks the rebirth of the world. For weeks the elders dance with masks representing constellations, and each step is a symbolic equation: the sun, moon, planets, time, and soul moving in harmony. The elders say that when Sigui ends, the universe rebalances itself. It's as if time itself is breathing again. They call it the pulsar of Potolo, the life-sustaining breath of the star. Many researchers have tried to rationally explain this enigma. Some suggest that the Dogons could have received astronomical information through European contacts before Griol's visit. Others believe he misinterpreted ritual symbols and metaphors. But these hypotheses cannot erase the fascination of one fact. The Dogons spoke of an invisible star centuries before science proved it real. And there's an even more intriguing detail. His words about Sirius B aren't just technical, they're spiritual. They say that Potolo is the primordial grain, the first seed from which the entire universe sprouted, that everything that exists was born from the vibration of this star, and that each human being carries within them a particle of this light. For them, studying the sky is remembering where the soul came from. What for us is physics, for them is memory. What we call gravity, they call cosmic love, the force that holds everything together. And when modern science looks at the sky with instruments, the Dogons close their eyes and see it from within. Perhaps the true mystery is not in the stars, but in the gaze that contemplates them. As humanity searches for life outside Earth, the Dogons seem to carry the echo of a time when heaven and man still spoke the same language. What if this knowledge wasn't a discovery but a memory? What if the Dogons weren't observing the universe, but remembering a place we all came from? Because sometimes the oldest knowledge is not learned with the eyes, but with the soul, and perhaps the Dogons are the mirror that the cosmos uses to recognize itself in us. In the next few moments we will go deeper into this mirror, to get to know the beings who, according to them, brought the knowledge of the stars to Earth, the Nomos. Between the dunes of the desert and the silence of the Bandiagara Mountains, the Dogons keep a history that seems to come from another world. They say that long before the first man built a dwelling of clay, something came down from the heavens. It wasn't lightning. It wasn't a shooting star. It was a light that fell on the waters, and when it touched the earth, it became sound. From this vibration, the Nomos emerged, beings from Sirius, half man, half fish, messengers of wisdom, guardians of the tides of the cosmos. According to the elders, the Nomos came to restore the harmony that had been lost. They arrived in ships that rotated like seeds carried by the wind, enveloped in white flames and deep sounds, like thunder drums. When they came down, they taught the Dogons to read the sky, to plant according to the cycles of the stars, and to understand that each grain of sand has a soul. They showed that the universe is a body, and that man is the heart beating within it. To the Dogons, the Nomos are not distant gods but older brothers. They were born in the waters of Sirius and traveled through the river of time until reaching this planet. Therefore, in Dogon villages, water is sacred, a symbol of the origin of everything. They say that every time a child is born, a drop of the stellar ocean remembers who it is. Marcel Griol, when recording this cosmology, was impressed by the coherence of the myths. The Dogons described the coming of the Nomos as a real event, occurring in a mythical time when heaven and earth still touched. They said that celestial visitors brought the living word, a language of vibrations capable of shaping matter. With it, they taught that sound creates form, and that the universe is solidified music. In their symbolic language, they said, God sings and the world is born. There are those who interpret the Nomos as spiritual beings, archetypes of universal consciousness. Others see them as reminders of ancient extraterrestrial contacts, echoes of cosmic civilizations that would have sown knowledge on Earth. But perhaps the truth lies beyond what want label, because in essence, the nomos represent the intelligence that inhabits life, the spark that awakens when man learns to listen. When a Dogon speaks of the nomos, his eyes turn to the horizon. It's as if talking about ancestors who still breathe under the wind. They believe that the nomos are still present, invisible, moving among the sound of the waters and the shine of the stars. During rituals, they invoke them through chants that imitate the movement of waves. The dances reproduce the rotation of the galaxies, and the human body becomes an instrument of remembrance. The central teaching of the nomos is simple. Everything that exists is a reflection of the same breath. There is no separation between matter and spirit, between man and star. Every human breath is the echo of a starburst, every heartbeat a reminder of the cosmic rhythm. And it is at this point that myth and science seem to touch. Today we know that the elements that make up our bodies, iron, calcium, carbon, were forged in stars that died billions of years ago. We are literally made of stardust. What the Dogons sing as poetry, astrophysics confirms as fact. Perhaps the nomos did not descend from metallic ships but from the very heart of the universe, manifesting in the awakening human consciousness. If something inside you is awakening, stay until the end. The answer may be here. Because what the Dogons call messengers of Sirius could be the same impulse that moves man to seek the infinite, the same voice that has always whispered, "Remember where you came from." And perhaps by understanding the nomos, we are simply recognizing within ourselves the memory of a people who were never separated from heaven. The encounter between the Dogons and modern science is like the crossing of two rivers that should never touch. One is born from reason, the other from memory. When anthropologist Marcel Griol and his collaborator Germaine Dieterlen published their studies in the 1940s, the academic world was divided. On the one hand, the fascination, an African tribe possessed astronomical knowledge that only 20th century technology had confirmed. On the other, skepticism. Could it be possible that this knowledge was the result of coincidences or misinterpretations? Griol lived among the Dogons for more than a decade, learning their rituals and the symbolic language of their myths. According to him, the elders described Sirius B with details impossible to guess. The tiny size, the extreme density, the 50-year orbit, and they also mentioned a third star, Emma, which modern astronomy is still trying to confirm. But when Griol died, other anthropologists tried to repeat the study and did not find the same level of accuracy. It was the beginning of the controversy. Some researchers have suggested that Griol may have influenced the Dogons' responses, perhaps unintentionally projecting his own ideas during the interviews. Others have proposed that European missionaries or travelers could have brought astronomical information to the region before their research. Science sought logical explanations, as if the mystery needed to fit into an equation. But the more they tried to fit the Dogons into rational molds, the more the enigma grew. Astronomer Carl Sagan was one of those who doubted it. In his book Broca's Brain, he argued that Dogon knowledge could originate from conversations with Western visitors. On the other hand, scholars of comparative religions, such as Mircea Eliade, saw in the Dogon myths a symbolic structure too sophisticated to be a mere coincidence. For them, it was a spiritual map, not a scientific treatise. And perhaps therein lies the key. The knowledge of the Dogons is not technical, it is initiatory. When the Dogons speak of Sirius and Potolo, they are not describing a celestial body. They describe a state of consciousness. For them, each star is a vibration, and each vibration has a spirit. The invisible star is not just a physical object, but the hidden principle that moves the visible. It is the symbol of what cannot be seen, but supports everything. In scientific terms, we could call this quantum energy. In poetic terms, the soul of the universe. And what does science find when it approaches this perspective? Discover that, in fact, Sirius is a binary system, perhaps even a triple one. That there are invisible forces governing the movement of stars, gravity, magnetic fields, dark energy, and that all the matter that makes us up was born from ancient cosmic explosions. Myth and science, Each in their own way say the same thing. We are made of the same fabric as the stars. Perhaps the Dogons did not need telescopes because their instrument was silence itself. Perhaps they intuitively understood what physics is now beginning to prove, that the universe is a conscious body, and that each consciousness is a point of that body observing itself. While science measures, myth reveals. One talks about the how, the other about why. What unites them both is the search, this human need to look into the infinite and ask, where did we come from? And perhaps if science and myth had the courage to listen to each other, they would realize that they speak from the same sky with different languages. What if the knowledge of the Dogons is a reminder that reason and mystery do not exclude each other but complement each other? What if what we call myth is just ancient science expressed in poetry? What if the truth lies precisely at the point where both meet, where the heart understands what the eyes still cannot? Explain? In the next few moments we will dive deeper into this idea, because maybe what we call mystery is just memory, and the Dogons, more than guardians of the sky, may be guardians of the memory of who we really are. There is a silence that precedes sunrise in Bandiagara. The drums still sleep and the shadows seem to breathe. It is at this moment that the Dogon elders say they hear the echo of the stars. They believe that every sound in the universe is a memory, and that man, at birth, forgets part of this melody. The mission of life would be simple. Remember what you already know. For the Dogons, knowledge is not learned, is remembered. They teach that the human soul is a fragment of an ancient star, and that every thought is a spark trying to return home. Science may call it cosmic consciousness, but to them, it is the breath of Potolo, the original vibration that runs through everything that lives. The human being would therefore be a star in a state of oblivion. During initiation ceremonies, young Dogons spend days in silence in caves, observing the sky only through stone crevices. There they learn that each point of light is a story, and that the universe speaks to those who know how to listen. When they return, they bring drawings, symbols, and music that their masters interpret as messages from cosmic memory. They don't study the stars. They remember them. Maybe that's the real reason they knew about Sirius B. Not because they observed, but because they remembered. The cosmos, after all, lives inside every cell, recorded in atoms that were once stardust. If modern physics states that we are made of the same matter that shines in space, the Dogons simply translate, "We are the sky that dreams of itself." This view is not isolated. Cultures around the world have the same echo. The Mayans, the Egyptians, the Australian Aborigines, all claim to have come from the stars. But among the Dogons, this knowledge remained alive, not as a distant myth, but as a way of existing. They live in harmony with celestial cycles, plant when Sirius appears on the horizon and celebrate when it disappears. It is as if all life on Earth breathes at the same rhythm as the cosmos. When we look at the sky with telescopes, we see distances. When the Dogons look, they see memories. For them, each star is a door between the visible and the invisible, between what we once were and what we will still be. And that's why they say that death is not the end, just the return to the constellation from which we came. The soul, according to them, travels back through the light of Sirius, crosses the river of fire, and is reborn in another time, in another body, in another form. There is something deeply human about this belief. She reminds us that perhaps the meaning of life is not in accumulating knowledge, but in remembering what the heart has always known. The philosopher Teilhard de Chardin said that the universe is evolving to become aware of itself. The Dogons would say, he is already conscious and uses us to remember. Perhaps then, the mystery of the Dogons is not about space, but about the human interior. The sky they observe is the same one that pulses within us, the same one that reflects in the eyes of those who seek meaning. And when we understand this, the enigma changes shape. It's not about how they knew about Sirius, but how we forgot. Because in the end, remembering the stars is remembering who we are. And perhaps that is why the universe continues to call to us night after night with the same silent radiance as Sirius, as if to say, go back. The memory still lives in you. When we look at the Dogons, we see more than an African tribe. We see a mirror that reflects all the civilizations that in some way looked at the sky and recognized their own face there. Because the Dogons are not alone. In every corner of the earth, ancient people kept the same memory, their origins among the stars. In Egypt, the priests of Heliopolis claimed that their gods had come from a star in Orion's belt, bringing the knowledge of life and death. In Mesopotamia, the Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, beings descended from the firmament who taught agriculture, astronomy, and writing. Among the Mayans, the pyramids were mirrors of the Milky Way, and their ceremonies were guided by the movement of Sirius, which they called the Star of Rebirth. In South America, the Incas said that the few leaders of their civilization emerged from the waters of Lake Titicaca, guided by a ray of light from the sky, a vivid reminder of the aquatic nomos of the Dogons. The pattern repeats itself: stars, water, wisdom, and return. Perhaps these symbols are not coincidences, but fragments of a universal memory that each culture translated in its own way. If humanity is an orchestra, myths are the notes of the same cosmic melody played on different instruments. And there is something deeper, the connection between architecture and constellation. Egyptian temples, Mayan pyramids, and even Europe's megalithic circles follow precise astronomical alignments. It was as if the ancients wanted to fix the geometry of the sky on Earth, to transform the invisible into stone, eternity into form. The Dogons did the same with their dances and masks. Each step reproduces the movement of the stars. Each rhythm draws the trajectory of Sirius in the air. Everything is a symbol, and the symbol is memory. Modern science tends to separate this knowledge as if they were isolated islands. But when we look at them together, they form a map, a star map of human consciousness. They all point to the same destination: reconnection with the cosmos. The ancients did not look at the sky to measure distances, but to remember the way back. They knew that the body is the earth and the spirit is the sky, and that between them there is an invisible bridge made of light and time. The Dogons kept this bridge alive. While other cultures were swallowed into oblivion, they continued to celebrate their Sirius rituals, preserving the rhythm that the rest of the world had forgotten. This is why so many scholars say that, by understanding the Dogons, we also understand the Egyptians, the Mayans, the Sumerians, because they are all faces of the same mirror. Each myth is a version of the same call. Remember, you came from the stars. And perhaps the most beautiful thing about this mirror is what it reveals about us. When we hear these stories, something inside us awakens, an inexplicable feeling of familiarity, as if we had already been there, in the pyramids, in the forests, on the banks of the Nile, or in the Dogon caves. It is the echo of primordial memory, vibrating in every cell that still knows where it came from. Because in the end, all ancient civilizations seem to seek the same answer: a reunion with heaven. Maybe they weren't just watching the stars, but remembering to be stars. And that's why, even after millennia, when we look at Sirius shining above, something in us recognizes that shine. It's not outside, it's inside. It's the memory sparking again. Maybe heaven was the first book, and the Dogons just haven't forgotten how to read it. There are stories that don't end. They just change form. That of the Dogons is one of them. Because in the end, it's not just about a people, a star, or an ancient myth. This is about us. How, somewhere within human memory, there is still the memory that we belong to heaven. When the wind blows on the slopes of Bandiagara, the Dogons say it is the nomos whispering lest man forget. They talk about harmony, time, and return. And each generation that is born learns to look at Sirius as if looking for a distant home. Maybe that's what drives us from the beginning, the desire to return to the light we once were. Science continues to try to measure the universe, and it must continue. But there are dimensions that cannot be measured, only felt. The eye. Dogons teach us that understanding the cosmos is not a matter of instruments, but of consciousness. The telescope shows the shape of the stars. The heart reveals their meaning. Maybe that's why, when we look at the sky, we feel a nostalgia that's impossible to name, as if something in us knows that we are not looking out, but in. Between myths and equations, the mystery of the Dogons remains. Some say it's a coincidence, others that it is proof of ancestral contact, but perhaps it is neither. One thing nor the other. Perhaps the enigma exists only to remind us that life is broader than what we can explain. and that each star that is born is a question that the universe asks itself. Meanwhile, the Dogons continue dancing. The masks spin, the dust rises, and the drums repeat the rhythm of Sirius. It is a prayer without words, a silent conversation between man and the infinite, and in that moment, everything seems to align. Body, soul, and cosmos breathing in the same rhythm. There, time stops. What was a legend becomes a presence. What was distant becomes a memory. If this message touched something for you, subscribe and follow us. Your soul may be remembering the path, because perhaps the true purpose of this mystery is not to decipher Sirius, but to awaken what sleeps in us. The spark that observes the sky and recognizes in each point of light the reflection of the spirit itself. And when, at the end of the night, the brightest star appears only over the horizon, perhaps you will recognize it too, not like a distant star but like a mirror, a silent reminder that we came from the stars, and to them we will return. What if what we call the end is just the beginning of a memory that the soul has not yet forgotten? And if the real secret of the Dogons is not in the stars they observe, but in the silence with which they listen to them? Maybe the universe never stopped talking to us. It was just humanity that forgot how to listen.